Hey guys, it's Shara from Woodshop Diaries, and today I want to show you how I built my walk-in closet. When we moved in, all that was in here was just a single shelf with a rod on each side of the closet wall. Redoing the closet really wasn't high on our priority list until we got moved in and realized that living out of boxes on the floor was just not going to cut it for very long. So I bumped this project a little bit higher on the to-do list and went ahead and tackled it. I am so excited with how this turned out, but I will warn you that this project took place over the course of about 2 weeks, and in that 2 weeks there were a whole lot of other things that were going on outside of this that caused building this to be a little chaotic. That said, I built all of these pieces separately and in no logical order whatsoever. But don't worry, I've done my absolute best to organize this video into sections that make a lot more sense than what I did in reality. So I hope that despite the chaos, you enjoy the build, and if you're ready to get started, let's go. Let's kick off this walk-in closet video with a quick glance at what it looked like before. Okay, so I know that the camera is wobbly. Please forgive that for a second. But I just wanted to give you a little tour of the closet we have here. So this room is almost 9 feet deep and it's almost 8 feet wide, and it's got 2 shelves and 3, not even 3 full racks for clothes. But that's it. The entire closet. There's nothing else in here. The first thing I did was remove the closet door and take down the existing shelves and brackets. Oh, the camera's in the way. I'm gonna damage something here. I also removed the baseboards and the trim since I was going to be taking these new cabinets wall to wall. Once the room was empty, I patched the holes in the wall and painted it white to give me a clean slate to work with. Then I started building. I built everything here using cabinet grade plywood. I had to use a combination of birch and maple since my store ran out of birch, and I switched over to maple mid-project. I used my circular saw and Kreg Ripcut to start making my cuts. I'll link a guide for how I cut down full sheets in the description below. This closet consisted of 5 main parts. I built everything in the shop separately and then carried them all inside to install them. The first section was the clothes rack cabinets with drawers at the bottom. So these are the main cabinets. There's going to be 2 of these on each side of the closet. For the depth right here, I actually cut these 19 inches deep. So I can cut 2 19-inch pieces from a sheet of plywood and then have about a 10-inch wide strip left. I can use that 10-inch wide strip to build the drawer boxes. And then also for these shelves right here, I actually did 17-inch deep shelves because I have 16-inch drawer slides and the drawers are going to be inset, so I needed about 17 inches to be able to do that down here at the bottom. If I cut 2 17-inch pieces from a sheet of plywood, I have a 14-inch piece left, which I can actually build I'm going to build some shelves in between these 2 cabinets on one side of the closet. So while it's not really the most efficient use of plywood as far as the dimensions go, I kind of accounted for that inefficiency in trying to find places to use those leftover pieces elsewhere in the build. Normally, I would share detailed plans and dimensions for my projects, but since this particular project was custom fit to my space, it's very likely that the exact dimensions I used won't work for you. However, I have linked step-by-step details with diagrams in the description below so that you can follow the same idea but figure out your own dimensions to fit your own space. For each of these 4 cabinets, I used my Kreg AccuCut and circular saw and trimmed 2 80-inch long side panels and 2 30.5-inch long shelves. That made the cabinet's overall width 32 inches. I also ripped some plywood scraps 3.5 inches wide and cut 2 pieces, one for the toe kick and one for the back support. I applied iron-on edge banding to the fronts of the side panels and the shelves, and then sanded all of my pieces before assembling. Once my pieces were ready, I pulled out my Kreg 720 pocket hole jig and drilled pocket holes along the ends of the shelves and the 2 small strips to assemble each cabinet. I used pocket hole screws to attach the bottom shelf 3.5 inches from the bottom edge, then installed the toe kick strip 3.5 inches from the front edge. I I measured and installed the top shelf about 52 inches down from the top edge, and I'm really just picking numbers here. 52 inches seemed like a good height to be able to hang most of our clothes. Notice that I did keep these shelves flush to the back edge of the side panels so that they're inset a little from the front. There's really no reason for this except that I just liked the way that it looked, so you can make them all the same depth if you wanted. Then I screwed the second plywood strip at the top back corner. I'll use this strip to secure these cabinets to the wall once they're in the closet. While I had the cabinet on its side on the workbench, I went ahead and installed 2 drawer slides into the bottom section. I was installing inset drawers here, so I made sure to install these 3/4 inches in from the front edge of the shelves. I have a guide to installing drawer slides that I will link below for details if you're interested. Once the slides were in place, I flipped it over to attach the second side panel the same way and also the 2 drawer slides at the bottom. I was able to reuse the dowel rods that I removed from the original closet and cut them down to install into these cabinets. I screwed these in through the side panels about 2 3/4 inches down from the top edge and centered front to back. This left enough room to be able to add some standard size hangers. At this point, it's time to add the drawers. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this video that I built this in no logical order. I built and installed the drawers in the first 2 of these cabinets that I made before carrying them inside to install in the closet. But for the second 2 that I made, I went ahead and carried them inside before adding the drawers. Either way works totally fine, but it was a lot easier to add these in the shop than cramped in a tight closet. To build the drawers, I used my leftover 10-inch wide plywood strips to cut down the pieces to make 2 drawer boxes for each cabinet. If you've seen many of my videos, you probably know the drill by now, but I cut these pieces to length, then cut dadoes to install the 1/4 inch drawer bottoms. I assembled the boxes using pocket holes and screws. Edge banding on drawers is totally optional, but I do think it looks a lot nicer, so I did edge band the top of these pieces before putting them together. Then I installed the drawer boxes into the cabinets. I have an entire tutorial that I'll link below that walks you step by step how to measure, build, and install drawers and drawer slides. After I got the drawers installed, I could push the cabinets into the corner where I wanted them and install them to the wall. I'm going to switch sides of the closet here to show you how I actually installed these. I screwed both cabinets together through the side panels, then used a level and a stud finder to drive 1 screw per cabinet through the back support into a stud, making sure that the side panels were straight up and down. To finish these up, I cut 2 3/4 inch plywood drawer fronts to install on each cabinet. I edge banded these drawer fronts, brought them inside, and screwed them in through the front of each drawer box, leaving an 1/8 inch gap on all sides. Now again, I have a complete guide on how to figure out your drawer front measurements that I will link in the description. I went ahead and added the drawer pulls here too, because if I didn't go ahead and add these now, I wouldn't be able to open the drawers again since they are inset. Now that these main sections of the closet were in, I could move on to the next part, this narrow cabinet at the front left side. Before we dive into that, I want to take a minute to share about our video sponsor, Kreg Academy. You guys know that I love Kreg, and you have and will see me using several of their tools, jigs, and guides in this closet build project. But besides the fact that they make cabinet and furniture building easier with their tools, they also provide so many helpful resources to inspire, educate, and encourage people from every skill level to get building. I was given the opportunity to work with them to create a few project video courses packed full of information. Kreg Academy also offers over 40 skills videos breaking down basic foundational information that you can use in every project that you build. People tell me all the time that they want to get started, but they just aren't sure how. And this is a great way to dive in, learn some foundational building skills, and tackle a project with detailed step-by-step videos and project support from actual people if you get stuck. If you want to learn more about Kreg Academy, I will leave a link to check it out in the video description. Okay, now let's get back to building that cabinet. This tall, narrow cabinet was a special request that Danny wanted for some of his smaller items to keep stored and organized. I built this cabinet the same height and depth as the clothes rack cabinets, but cut a narrower divider panel to split the top section in half. Because this cabinet was so narrow, I knew I wouldn't be able to get the shelf pin jig and the drill into the space to drill holes after it was assembled. So I drilled these first before screwing anything together. I used my shelf pin jig to drill holes up and down the panels, making sure to keep them lined up. This will allow me to add adjustable shelves up and down this cabinet later as needed. Once the shelf pin holes were drilled, I assembled this cabinet the same way as the others using pocket holes and screws. And just like the others, I added a 3.5-inch toe kick piece at the bottom. After the main part of the cabinet was together, I used some wood screws and scrap blocks to evenly space and attach the divider panel between the top and middle shelves. This was a super basic little cabinet and it went together really quickly. I carried it inside to secure it in place in the closet. Since this cabinet was so narrow, I knew that there wasn't going to be a stud behind it to attach to, so I actually just used a screw through the side panel to secure it to the stud that way. Once the rest of the closet was complete, I came back and added some narrow shelves and the door. I'll talk about the door a little bit later. But now that the actual cabinet was in place, I could move on to the third main part of the closet, these top boxes. These are obviously one of the simpler pieces of the closet as they consist of just 4 pieces screwed together. I could have saved some lumber here by adding a single shelf across the top of these cabinets on each side, but I really just wanted the look of these boxes going all the way to the ceiling, so that's what I did. I measured and built a simple plywood box to fit over the top of the 2 clothes rack cabinets first. I cut the 4 pieces to assemble the box, added iron-on edge banding, then screwed them together using wood screws. You could use pocket holes here instead, and you could also build these so that the top and bottom span the entire width versus butting them up to the sides. It doesn't really make a big difference here either way. I slid the box on top of the cabinets and used wood screws to secure them in place. I drove a few screws at an angle on each end at the front, used a few in the middle, and also used a couple at the back to secure it to the back supports of the cabinets below. After that box was in, I measured and built a second one to slide in right beside it. I secured this second box to the one beside it and to the top of the narrow cabinet in the front corner. As a general note, none of these walls were perfectly square and they got narrower in the corners. So I had some small gaps around the edges of each cabinet in the closet. I left these gaps as they were small and they didn't really bother me, but if they do bother you, you can always add some trim around it at the end to cover them up. I repeated this process for the other side of the closet and I got a little help from Danny to help me install the box that didn't have a cabinet below it. For this side of the closet, since there wasn't anything underneath that front box, I used a couple screws through the side to secure the box into the wall studs, just like I did with the narrower cabinet earlier. The fourth part of the closet was adding these shelf boxes on the left side. This again was a super simple part. I used some of the leftover plywood, the 14-inch wide pieces that I mentioned earlier, to assemble these 3 boxes. I cut pieces to fit perfectly in the open space on the left side of the closet and cut 12-inch long pieces for the sides of each box. I edge banded the front edges of each piece and assembled the boxes using pocket holes and screws. Notice that I faced the pocket holes on the outside here so that they won't be seen once they're installed. On the bottom box, I also added a 3.5-inch toe kick across the bottom side just to keep things consistent between all of the cabinets. Please let this fit, please let this fit, please let this fit. It fits! Yes! Sometimes you have to ask yourself the question, Lou. Are we helping or are we in the way? Do we need to hold hands? Do we need to hold hands? I don't think we really need to hold hands. I slid the bottom box in place and made sure it was level and square, then screwed it in between the 2 existing cabinets on each side. I removed the drawer to put the screws where they wouldn't be seen in this side cabinet. Then I added the top box the same way, and finally the middle box. Each shelf was spaced 12 inches apart. Now, you could save some lumber here by using shelf pins and adding adjustable shelves, or simply screwing in single stationary shelves and not assembling a whole box. There are a million other ways to do this. But I really just liked how this looked, and it was simple to put together, so I did the boxes. Now the closet is almost done, but the last piece was adding the dresser cabinet for the bottom right side. I built this to fit perfectly in the space that was left. I cut 2 sides, a top, a bottom, a divider, and a toe kick, and edge banded the front edge of everything except the toe kick. I tried to use whatever leftover plywood that I had for this, since it was the last piece of the closet. I drilled pocket holes into both ends of the bottom panel and into only the top end of the sides and divider panels. This is definitely not how I would typically assemble a dresser or a cabinet. I wouldn't normally use pocket holes to attach the top panel where they'd be seen. If you want to see how I would normally build dressers, I do have several videos on that already. But since this was going into a little nook and the sides won't be seen, I did things a little simpler in this case. I screwed this dresser together so that the bottom panel was 3.5 inches up from the bottom edge of the side panel. Then I attached the top using pocket holes on the outside of the side panels. Once the main body was together, I attached the toe kick, then installed the middle divider. I decided which side that I wanted to put the door and made sure to hide the pocket holes in that side of the dresser. I only use pocket holes at the top here and then just use wood screws at the bottom, making sure to keep the divider panel square. I use my Kreg shelf pin jig to drill shelf pins along the sides of each section to be able to add adjustable shelves later as needed. So the shelf pin jig obviously have these holes and they are not centered. They are closer to one edge than they are the other. So on the front here, because I was gonna have a door in this section that was gonna be inset, I wanted to make sure, and I even thought about this. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I even thought about this. I need to make sure that these holes are as far away from this front edge as I can, so that it needed to be turned this way when drilling my holes, but I accidentally thought that and then didn't do it when I first started drilling the holes, so I drilled a few holes right here. Oh well, mistakes are inevitable, so just sometimes you just have to accept them. Then I carried this cabinet inside and installed it in place in the closet. I secured it to the cabinet next to it and to the wall stud to the right. Now all that was left was the finishing touches. I added a baseboard to the back of the closet and replaced the door trim that I had removed at the beginning. And I have a separate video on door and window trim that I will link below if you want to know more about that. Then I cut 2 inset 3/4 inch plywood doors, one for the tall narrow cabinet and one for the dresser cabinet. I have a guide for how to size your cabinet doors that I will link below if you want more information on how to cut the doors to fit. I edge banded each of these, sanded them well, and then pulled out my Kreg concealed hinge jig to drill out holes to insert the hinges. I installed soft close concealed inset hinges into each door, then brought them inside to install them into the cabinets. I also have a guide for how to install and adjust concealed hinges that I will link below if you want to know more about that as well. At this point, all that was left was adding a couple shelves where I had drilled shelf pin holes and filling it up. I'm sure over time we will figure out how best to use this closet and add more shelves as needed, but for now, I just added a single shelf in the dresser and a few shelves in the tall cabinet. Compared to the previous closet, we have tons more storage in here, so there's actually plenty of empty space for now, and I do kind of like it that way. Just a note, I didn't bother finishing these cabinets. I may later, but for now, they're unfinished, and I'm fine with that. I'm so happy to finally have my clothes unpacked and out of the boxes, and to have things better organized and hidden away. I really hope you guys enjoyed seeing this closet come together, and I hope it's given you some inspiration for your own space. Don't forget to head to the description for plans, links, and guides to help you in your own builds, and to check out Kreg Academy if you're interested. And if you aren't already subscribed, be sure to follow along so you don't miss out on what's coming next. Thanks so much for watching, friends, and until next time, happy building!